I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning meeting of Melton Borough Council. I'm Councillor Pam Posnett, Chair of Planning. Housekeeping: in the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits situated around the side of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phone to silent during this meeting. We will be using the audio visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. I just have an announcement to make before I proceed. There have been some comments by people who've been viewing online about the number of councillors that leave the council chamber during the discussions and then come back in. So what I'm proposing to do is, if we get to 7:30 and it looks as if we're going to be continuing, I will have a 5-minute break. Okay? If members wish to speak, it's done by raising your hand and speaking directly into the microphone in front of you. Remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. The members this evening are Councillor Brown, Councillor Chandler, Councillor Evans, Councillor Fisher, Councillor Holmes, Councillor Illingworth, Councillor Pritchett, Councillor Smith and Councillor Wood. We have a team of officers present who are, to my right, our legal advisor, Tom Pickwell, and to my left, the Planning Development Manager, Louise Parker. We also have our Democratics services present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes, Helen Ainge and Sarah Evans. We have one apology for absence, and that is Councillor Webster, who has been detained at work, so will not be joining us this evening. We have the meetings on the 29th of September to vote that they were correct, or if anybody have got any comments about them. Were there any problems with the minutes of the 29th of September? Any problems where you're saying with the minutes of the 29th of September? Right, thank you. So can I have a proposer for those minutes, please? Councillor Smedley? Smith? I still keep, sorry. And the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October, 2022. Are there any issues with that? So can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Wood? Seconder? Councillor Fisher? Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest that members need to declare as appropriate in respect of the items to be considered at this meeting? Councillor Illingworth.
I can't remember whether I need to stand or not. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm declaring a personal and non-pecuniary interest in the Sandy Lane application by virtue of the potential for a perceived bias. So I will vacate my chair for the duration of that item and take no part in the proceedings.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. That is noted. Councillor Brown.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I will be declaring an interest in application and 4.2 regarding the variation planning obligations for the Marquis Road and north of Station Road, Old Dalby. Reece Bean is a portfolio holder for council housing and landlord services, and I have been heavily involved in the negotiations of the purchase of those properties subject to the planning this evening.
Fine, thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other interests, anybody? No? Fine, well, thank you very much. So we're now on to the schedule of applications. The first application we'll be looking at is the former poultry farm on Sandy Lane, Melton Mowbray, which is application 20/00438/REM. So I'll now hand over to Louise Parker, who will be taking us through this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application before you is a reserve matters application. It is for the development of the former poultry farm site. Just to give members a bit of history to the site, the development for the poultry farm was approved at appeal in February 2016, and then outline permission for 30 dwellings and associated works was approved July 2016. If we can move on, please. So in 2016, the outline application, which is reference 1500537, the matters approved there was the principle of development along with the access onto Sandy Lane. So the red line as displayed, and also the point of access onto Sandy Lane. So those are the matters that have been agreed as part of the principle of development. If we can move on, please. What the outline permission also had was a number of planning conditions attached to it. Within those conditions, they require the submission of further details to be provided. So those details relate to highways, drainage, contamination, along with archaeology. So further details are to be submitted, but they will be submitted as part of a discharge of condition. It should also be noted that the Section 106 agreement, which was tied to the outline approval, requested a scheme to be approved for the Nissan huts, and it also confirmed a number of financial contributions to the scheme as well. So if we can move on again, please. For the purpose of this evening's discussion, debate and consideration, members are invited to look at the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the proposed development before them. So they are the elements of the reserve matters this evening. If we can move on, please. And so if we take them one by one. So before you, this is just a sample of the details that have been provided. In terms of appearance and scale, what you'll see are there are different designs of buildings throughout the proposal. We've got a mixture of size and scale, single and two-storey, varying heights from 6 metres being a single storey to between 8 and 9 metres as the two-storey dwellings. There is also a condition on the outline which requires a submission of materials. So those details again will come forward as part of the discharge. If we can move on, please. So the next element is the landscaping and the layout of the proposal. So as you can see before you, there's quite a large number of trees being added to the scheme, the landscaping especially. There's an additional 150 plus trees being planted on the site. There's the retention of existing trees and infilling of hedgerows. The proposed variety of trees range from examples of maple, birch and oak. The layout is designed to be inclusive and also connected, ensuring sufficient space between dwellings. But as you can see, with the one main road and then the smaller pocket being an inclusive development. We can have the next slide, please. So whilst I commented earlier that the Nissan huts aren't for discussion this evening, they're secured by the Section 106 agreement, and the details of the proposed scheme will come forward separately. What is needing to be considered as part of the layout is the location of any proposed scheme regarding the Nissan huts. So what you can see there is a dedicated space that will be preserved for whatever scheme comes forward as part of the discharge. If we can have the next slide, please. So continuing with the layout, at the beginning of the site, there's focal points and interest with regards to attenuation ponds. There's speed reducing calming measures as part of the entrance to the site. And at the very beginning, there's the mixture of both the two-storey and the single-storey elements, creating visual interest as you enter the site. Move on to the next slide, please. So just to confirm, officers have reviewed the representations that have been received as part of the application process. Statutory consultees have either requested amendments to the scheme, which have been received and further consultation undertaken, or they've requested conditions added to any permission should members reach that conclusion. Of particular reference, officers have listened to the concerns of members regarding ecology and protected species. So confirmation has been sought from ecology, and just to conclude on the matter, that there are no objections from statutory consultees in relation to this scheme. With regards to protected species, if harm does occur to protected species, then I just want to clarify for members that this is a wildlife crime and it's a matter for the police, not part of the planning application process. The condition requires the mitigation of harm, so measures in place to prevent harm. But if actual harm did take place, that would be something outside of the remit of planning. So officers have recommended the application for approval, subject to condition as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Has anybody got any comments, questions they wish to make to Louise? Councillor Fisher, Councillor Evans.
Could I ask Louise, in section 1.3, it says the outline planning approval reference approved demolition of existing structures on the site and the redevelopment of the site to create 30 dwellings, including refurbishment of an existing Nissan hut to create a community space and associated open space, landscaping, etc. There is no existing Nissan hut. So how can that be anything that you write in this remit? I'm afraid it's gone, dead. We've been there. So we need, for clarification, this to be changed, because there is no existing Nissan hut. You make it out as there is one, there isn't one.
Okay, so the redevelopment is part of a scheme that will come forward as part of the Section 106 agreement. The redevelopment of that, like I say, when the Section 106 discharge is submitted, that will include the details of how that scheme will look. For the purpose of this evening, we're not considering the Nissan huts.
I'm just saying that the minutes of this are wrong, because there is no existing Nissan hut. You cannot do that. It says including the refurbishment of an existing Nissan hut. There is no Nissan hut. This is wrong for the public. The public will think there's a Nissan hut there. How can we proceed when this document is wrong?
Members, my understanding is that the description at 1.3 is the description that came from the outline proposal. I appreciate what you're saying, but it's still part of the 106 that was involved in the outline permission. So there's no relevance to the reserve matters today, albeit I take that there is a valid point to be resolved at some point.
Could I just ask, is that surely not an enforcement notice? Because you're saying there should be an existing Nissan hut. There is no longer a Nissan hut. They have broken the rules of the Section 106. Surely our officers should be pursuing and saying this is an enforceable notice.
So to be clear, it was part of the 106 rather than a condition, so it would be enforcement of the Section 106. When we've looked at the 106, there isn't a breach because the demolition is not part of development for the purposes of the Section 106 agreement. So there isn't anything there to enforce on the 106.
I could follow that, I really do. It's clear in the minutes, and this is what worries me, Chair, and I'm being frank here. It's clear in the minutes of the meeting, the Chair said the existing Nissan hut has to be refurbished for it to be a community space. And he wanted that in the Section 106, yet somehow in the Section 106 from the minutes, it has been omitted and just become a refurbished Nissan. This is worrying me greatly, because we're going from what was agreed in the committee to what the officers have put in a Section 106 being different. And that, I hope you, Chair, you agree is unacceptable.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, so I have to tend to agree a little bit with Chris on Councillor Evans on this. Is how can you refurbish something that's not there? And then from the extent, from the original outline planning coming through, and the comments that are made on it is that if it's varied so much that it would have to be reconsidered, I'm not following how we're managing to circumvent all of what we're writing down. Could we explain how we're going from the outline determination to what we're coming here and why we're omitting all of the other things around this? Because basically what we're doing as a committee, from what I gather, we will make this decision tonight, and then anything outside of that will be made by officers. Is that correct?
So sorry, to confirm, not necessarily. So it will come through as an application to discharge, not to discharge, to approve the scheme under the 106. It's not a normally these things would be condition, and it will be a discharge of condition application. It will be a similar process, albeit through the section 106. It's still a decision that's made by the council through the function of its planning remit. There is no reason, therefore, why that couldn't come back to the planning committee if it was called in or requested or met any of the criteria in the constitution.
So could we can ask for that condition that tonight, that the next stage of this comes back to the planning committee for approval or refusal?
We can't condition it as a planning condition, but we can treat that as a call-in request, and provided that's met in accordance with the constitution, so on material planning considerations, that can be brought before the planning committee in accordance with the planning procedure rules. So the short answer is yes, not as a condition, but it would need to be a call-in request.
Really, really clear, because so if there was minded to make whatever decision tonight and we said we want it back, we would make that request as part of the approval tonight, and that will be recorded and that will be followed through properly and not ignored. Yes, that what we're saying. Yeah, just so we're absolutely clear. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the discussions that has been held with the agents, and if members are minded to approve, with regards to the Nissan Hut, they have said that they will engage with the community, the parish council, the ward members, and do consultation and workshops. So what we will do as part of that is consult the relevant persons, by which point, yes, a calling can be made and it can come back to planning committee, the actual specific details in terms of the discharge of section 106.
Any of us call it in, or does it have to be the chair?
Any member can call it in.
Any more, Councillor Brown, or is that answered? Councillor Holmes.
It is now. Yeah, we're on. Yes, Louise, I'd like to ask you, Leicestershire County Council Highways, no objections, but you did say that you had talked to the consultees again, and there's still no objections. My concern, I do remember at the briefing, various people said that nobody's got any money these days, but you have to have ambulances, don't you? And I can see that if people come out onto that road, it is very, very narrow, 30 houses, at least 60 cars. And the applicant does not own the land each side the road, and there's a ditch each side as you come out. Now, has this been, have you as the planners actually gone to the county council and told them about this? Have you, or has it been just done on a Zoom or just really on a computer? Have they been to look at it? Because if they haven't been to look, they wouldn't know this. And it is really serious. I mean, it's virtually not able to happen. If you go and look at it again, you'll see there's a ditch each side. It's really narrow. And then you come straight out onto a little lane. It's ludicrous. And it's actually criminal if we actually do anything with, I haven't got a problem probably with the houses, but it's just the access. And I just wondered if you can look at it again. You go and look and you will see, and get the county council to go and look, please.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. So the access was approved as part of the outline permission. Part of the conditions included in the outline approval was the submission of further details. So with regards to the reserved matters, highways have been consulted. They have looked at the internal highway arrangements and they raised no comments. With regards to the access, again, that is part of the further details that will be submitted to discharge conditions related to the outline application. So at the moment, as part of the reserved matters, we cannot look at the access.
Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you. Can I ask you some questions about potential changes after tonight, Louise? Your Nissen Hut progress. What will happen if, when you come to some sort of an arrangement on the Nissen Hut, visitors to ceremonies to mark the Polish Air Force people, etc., retire to come in the cars and need car parking, and we're approving a design tonight? What happens when you look at the Nissen Hut and it's used, that you find, oh, we need a car, where do we park the cars? What happens then?
So with regards to the Nissen Hut, the location has specifically been chosen so that it does allow connection, non-vehicular connection also. So the location is specific space for a scheme to come forward, but then also to allow visitor connection on foot and parking associated to the scheme, but the details of which we're not considering at this time.
But what you're saying is, are you saying that there is adequate built into these plans, or that it will come up later and you'll have to adjust the design if necessary?
So the design won't be adjusted. The layout plan shows that there is space for a scheme to come forward, and the details of that scheme will be considered under the discharge of the Section 106.
But the next change, landscape management plan. Will the landscape management plan and any other related hardware like drop curbs or drain covers and gullies and such like be changed if necessary when the mitigation plan comes forward for the badgers and particularly the newts?
So details will come forward to discharge the conditions collectively. The badgers and the newts will be looked at and an assessment will be made with terms of their mitigation. Should that then subsequently changed any of the other details, that will be looked at the time. At the minute, there's nothing to suggest that further changes would need to be made. We're assessing the information as presented at this time.
One of the concerns for some of the members was the approving of the plans before us tonight without them having built in the mitigation for the great crested newts and the badgers. Right? After quite a bit of research, the result is that, and I've spoken, it's not quite as straightforward as the ecology don't object, but it's not, there's the mitigation issue. I spoke to close it off. I had a very useful conversation with the ecologist who has been dealing with this case at Leicester today. The normal process is that the mitigation is built into the plans, and I've had that confirmed by a Nottinghamshire independent planning consultant today. However, the view from the ecologist at Leicester, having looked at the plans on screen on the portal whilst on the phone to me, is that in this particular case they is not perceived the problem in proving this tonight when it comes to looking at the mitigation, and that mitigation and tweaks can be made. Now, the other issue is, I don't know under which license this is progressing forward, whether it's under the Leicestershire license or the Natural England license. Do you know which one it is?
I wouldn't, because we rely on the statutory consultee responses as the experts.
Right. Well, the issue is that not all, in respect of the district license, you may, but not in all times, I'm told, have to satisfy that. But under the Natural England licence for this development, which would have started at the outline, that Natural England are the ultimate deciders of what it will be. And in those cases, we're told we cannot, well, we will condition because we want it to come through. We'd like it to come through with Natural England. But I'm told Natural England, under that, if they issue the license, they have to see the mitigation and approve it. And because of the sensitivity, they may then ask for changes in the layouts of roads, etc., etc. So there is a particular risk there. So it's not an ideal situation, but the ecologist feels, given the nature of the site and what's in the document so far about, you know, and the fact that they can move a badger set if they want to move a badger set, it's not seen as a problem, but it's not ideal, and we shouldn't. I don't think we should be going forward like this again. And again, the landscaping in here doesn't necessarily take into account, you know, we could have trees planted on the south side of a pond that under mitigation you wouldn't have that for great crested newts. So that was the information that on that one, but I'll leave any more for the debate. But the only other thing to say at this question time is the design SPD and anything in the neighbourhood plan. Do we not have something about bird boxes and hedgehog highways in that should be a standard condition? It's normally in the Melton, you know, it's normally in. I couldn't see that. Then there's statements in the report that says there's an enhancement of habitat in a para 4.34. Again, says it again on 4.16, and then it says on page 4.19 improved habitat, and then 4.468 protection and improved habitat. We haven't had the mitigation review and mitigation yet, and we're taking away basically a scrub site and putting 30 houses with 2 cars there and everybody playing. So I can't see how that actually, you know, unless the Badgers joining the cricket games in the green, I can't see how it's going to actually improve things for them. And I think we need to be very, very careful about the statements that we put in or cut and paste from developers. So I can't go along with that at all, but I'll save anything else for the debate.
Any other questions? Councillor Evans?
I asked this question of Tom Pickwell before the meeting. It makes it very clear in the section 106 agreement that before any demolition takes place on the site, there must be an archaeological survey. Why are we not bringing that to the applicant and saying you have broken the rules of the agreement that was in the minutes of the meeting very, very clearly?
So the discharge of condition for condition 9.
In the minutes of the meeting, it made it very clear that an archaeological survey had to take place on the site before any demolition on the site.
So just to confirm, we're talking about a condition rather than section 106 agreement. Oh, no, okay, that's fine. No, if there's a breach of condition, then that can be enforced. I can't give you any answer as to why that wasn't enforced or wasn't involved at the time. I don't know whether Louise has any knowledge about that.
Just saying that Louise had it on the screen, and therefore she must know that the condition is very clear in the minutes of the meeting that any demolition cannot take place before a full archaeological survey of the site. So can I have an assurance that therefore that will be enforced and with the applicant?
You can, yes. So as I stated, there will be additional information to come forward through the submission of a discharge of condition. The agent is also here in the audience and will be presenting to you. And I'm sure he's taken notes of this as well. But yes, I can't comment on previous enforcement action or previous enforcement matters. But yes, as a discharge of condition, that information will be gathered and submitted.
Councillor Fisher.
I know we're not here to discuss the Nissan huts tonight, but it's obviously a major concern for quite a few members. Is there any reason we couldn't have discussed this as a part of the whole thing tonight? Why did it have to be separate?
So the matter is so it is a reserve matters application, which has its very specific details to consider. The section 106 is similar in some respects to a planning condition, and therefore separate to this decision making tonight. As stated earlier, the details can be called in, can come back to committee. There's not an issue with that at all.
Councillor Chandler.
Sorry, the design of the houses. I've no argument with the bungalows whatsoever. I think they look quite attractive. But prior to the local plan, well, even with the local plan, this is an unsustainable site in open countryside. Surely we should be putting houses there that have got a rural design. I mean, one of them, I mean, it looks appalling. It goes up into the sky, a very deep roof. I mean, that's not a rural design at all. I mean, surely we should be putting rural houses in a rural place. I mean, it's whatever we like to say, it's an unsustainable site, but I mean, we are where we are with that. So I can't argue that, but surely we should be putting rural houses on that type of site, not townhouses, because these are townhouses. And have they been agreed? This.
Are you asking a question about that, or is it just your statement?
I'm just asking. I've just asked the question. Have they been decided, and by whom?
So the appearance is part of the consideration for this evening. When officers have looked at the design as a whole, there's a varying of designs. Design is always going to be something which people agree or disagree on. It is officers' opinions that collectively the houses and the design is acceptable in accordance with the SPD, local plan and the neighbourhood plan.
I don't agree, but.
Councillor Pritchett.
One question to finish off with. Condition 9, as it stands at the moment before debate, Louise, will that be coming back? It's a sensitive issue now, and I'll say there's about 6 laws involved in this, never mind EN2. And we have our legal responsibility to fulfill. Number 9, will this be coming back to the planning committee?
Yep, Councillor Pritchett, it's exactly the same response as I gave to the section 106 query. Yes, you can call it in.
Well, I would want that. It's so significant, the compliance with the law. I don't know what other members think. I think that we need to be actually seeing that mitigation, and we've discharged our responsibilities in conjunction with other Natural England, etc., on this one.
Yep. So when they put in the discharge of application, discharge of condition application for that particular condition, you will be able to call that in. We can't make it a condition or relate it to this application and how you determine that, but there's no reason why that can't be called in when they make the application.
So how do you know about this to call it in then? And what happens if I'm not a councillor anymore when it comes in?
So we will undertake consultation on the discharge of condition.
No, that's not an answer, is it? I want to know now. Why can't we condition now tonight when debate condition that conditions come back?
The reason is the conditions are dealt with by way of a discharge of application. So until we get that application, there's nothing there to call in.
Comfortable with officers that know very little, little skills in the department on ecology and the law relating to wildlife to actually deal with it.
sorry, that's not to say that the officers will be the ones dealing with it, the planning officers. They will consult the relevant consultees. All I'm saying is you can't call in an application that's not yet an application.
Any more comments, anybody? No? Fine, thank you. I will now ask for Mr. Lee Harris, who's agent, to join us at the table in the middle. You'll see a shape of a face on the microphone stand. If you press that, it should turn red. That means that your microphone's on. You've got 3 minutes, Mr. Harris, and I will warn you at 30 seconds left. Okay.
Thank you very much. I had got a speech prepared, but given the sort of the questions that have come out this evening, I thought it would be wise to address them. So firstly, on the ecology side of things, you're absolutely right. There are great crested newts, there are badgers, and there are reptiles on site. The ecologists have looked at the site, they've looked at mitigation plans. With regard to the great crested newts, there's a district licence order that's in place with Natural England. And that will be basically some of the money is being paid for the relocation of those newts to an alternative site. It's costing over £100,000 for that relocation to take place. Having said that, the actual pond where the newts are staying are going to be maintained on the site, despite the fact we don't need to under the licence. But Natural England have been. The reason we've not been able to proceed any further is because we can't get the district licence to be concluded until such time as the planning application has been decided. With regards to the badgers, there's a badgers licence that needs to be done for the removal of one potential badgers bit, and you know, that particular part. The mitigation is that the outsides of the site where the existing badger sets are being protected, the vegetation and enrichment is all for that benefit. The potential relocation of the badger set is determined on whether the set is still active at the point at which it's investigated, and that is to be investigated in the coming months. If it is required, then a relocation will take place, and obviously we will follow due process where necessary. And the same thing applies to the reptiles. So I just wanted to, you know, address the council and say that we have taken all measures in place with that. We are in consultation with the ecologists. The county ecologist has agreed, and Natural England are well informed. With the regard to the highways, so a full highways design has been put forward. The comments we've had back from highways have been, we've actually developed into discharging the conditions, and we're now at a position where we could actually propose to discharge the conditions with the county highways officer with regard to the Bellmouth and also the passing places, additional passing places down Sandy Lane. So hopefully that should address the concerns regarding highways. With regard to archaeology that was mentioned, the archaeology survey has been carried out by Leicester Archaeology, again ready in anticipation for discharge conditions, and there was no findings on the site of interest whatsoever. With regard to the Nissan huts, which obviously the Nissan huts, again, it will be dealt with under 106, but we do have a plan, and we have consulted with the neighbourhood, and we're more than willing to continue consultation to discharge that and make sure it's a very important feature of the site, and we recognise that as part of the public and the Polish community.
You can just remain where you are, Mr. Harris, and give the members time to ask you any questions that they'd like to. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Harrison. Can you give us reassurance with the work that you've already done on the site, that you've not harmed any badgers, reptiles, or grey-crested newts, and that they're still in existence? Now, you did mention if the badger set's still being used, but whether you can reassure us that no animals have come to any harm?
Yes, I can confer that no harm has come. Obviously, it's a legal requirement. The ecologists have been out there recently and inspected it. We are aware of where the habitation is, and we're comfortable.
Councillor Holmes.
Hello. I'm pleased to hear that you are consulting about the highways and that you're going to put some passing places, which is obviously. Can you, how are you going to get out? That's what concerns me, onto the little lane, because there's a ditch, isn't there, each side, and it is quite narrow. You can't put passing places from the site down to Sandy Lane, can you? Because it's not wide enough. But it's not your land on each side, is it?
No, it's not. No. So again, the Belmouth itself, with regard to visibility displays and making sure it's safe to proceed onto Sandy Lane, has been designed and approved by Highways. With regard to the passing places, there are existing passing places on the way up to Sandy Lane, up to
Yeah, I
Melton
know.
Mowbray.
Yeah.
We're proposing to add some additional ones within the Highways land. And again, we've had approval to be able to do that. Again, just given the opportunity for those passing places for merging traffic.
Further, I can't quite understand the archaeology. Obviously, they've looked at the site, and there is nothing there. It's very strange because I was on the committee last time, so it's some time ago, and of course there was a leper colony at Burton Lazars, and apparently there was something to do with archaeology on that site at that time. So I'm only telling you something that we were told last time.
So when the scheme was first put forward and the outline planning consent, a desktop study would have been completed, and that would have been basically the research on the area, and they would have
Yeah.
made an assessment. What happens next is we appointed Leicester Archaeology, who are the go-to archaeologists in the area, and then they do the same research at the desktop and then identify areas where there's potential interests. They then look at the site as where the houses and the disruption to the site will be permanent. They then set out a scheme of where the layout of the excavations and the surveys will be carried out. They then do a trench dig, and then they do a sort of sampling, and they found nothing of interest on the site whatsoever.
It was somewhere on the edge of the site, I understood, and it was where the leper colony, part of the leper colony was.
So
It's only just that I remember it.
no, that's fine. So the scheduled ancient monument, which is the hospital,
Yeah,
there's quite a significant buffer that
Yes.
sits between this and the development. And as part of the heritage aspect, that buffer is an important feature to protect
Obviously.
obviously the asset. But equally, we wouldn't necessarily be digging in those areas because we're not disturbing the ground. So the idea of the archaeology is if there is archaeology, and I don't know if there is, and we've not been told otherwise, then there wouldn't be a need to do archaeology digging there because we're not disturbing the soil.
thank you.
So it stays intact and untouched.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you. It does say for the Great Crested Newts that it calls it for significant hazards, exclosure is better than enclosure. So is your licence with Natural England?
Yes, it is. And if I could just address the question in a little bit more detail. So the first thing that I looked at was to try and have some kind of mitigation plan with the idea of relocating the Great Crested Newts on site. And it was found that the habitat around the area was unsustainable given any urbanisation and the links that were lost between the external area. So we've created additional pools. We intend to enhance and enrich the existing pool that's there. But unfortunately, the only solution we have is to use the district licence as the vehicle through Natural England, who I say we've completed the forms. They've done the DNA test to establish that their presence. We've also done a full count, so we know exactly how many are in the pool. And then apply a criterion. Off memory, it's about 4.5 times each newt that's found, 4.5 times the newt needs to go. So we're sacrificing one pool, and there's 4.5 pools or 5 pools which will be generated to mitigate the new newt's location.
Is this separate to the ecology reports that are have been submitted to the planning department, to the council?
The documents that are online now should represent that. But obviously the district license order is something that we've put in place in readiness to complete the site. And again, we can't go any further. We've paid £24,000 so far to allocate the ponds where those Great Crested Newts could be housed. But we don't have the ability to progress any further forward. And that includes the badgers and the reptiles until planning has been discharged. So we've had our hands tied. But I can, believe me, it's quite close to my heart as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yes. So you will progress on with that. With the condition here at planning that there's a condition that says the mitigation plan. would you be able to, I mean, you have to keep Natural England happy. We've paid
We
for
do,
the
yes,
licenses.
yes.
That's the main thing. They decide on it. If
Mhm.
they decide, that's it, basically. But you would be able to supply those documents to discharge a planning condition here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, the mitigational process is obviously the great crested newts are removed in district license. The mitigation for the badgers is the sites that are located on mainly on the peripheral. So they'll be protected as they are, and you'll see the boundaries around them to make sure that they're kept intact. And then there's a potential relocation with one central set, which is next to the pond, to the northeast corner. And you'll see that on the drawing. But the question mark with the ecologist at the moment is the last time he went to the site, the set was flooded and he's just not sure whether it's active. So he's going to go back there again, assess whether it's active. If it's not active, it doesn't need to be moved. If it is active, then we've got plans to actually recreate a new one. And then we basically count and trap and make sure it's all humanely done.
The landscape plan that's with us tonight, that will have to satisfy Natural England as well. I mean, you will obviously have to amend that. If they say you put too many trees around your pond, you'll have to alter that plan.
So Natural England have had all the documents already. So it's a bit unfortunate. We've developed a bit further on from what you're actually seeing at planning, because obviously we can't give you any more than what we've got. But Natural England have seen it. And with regard to the badgers, that's under a different license. And that takes place for the badger license, closing the badger set. And the mitigation plan is all again in line with Natural England. So it's all compliant with the ecologists that we're working with. I hope that's satisfying.
Any other questions, Councillor Adams?
Thank you for the information. Obviously, as you can see, you're probably seeing some surprised eyes here, because we were all assuming you were mitigating locally, not on a district thing, and that's not in the information we've got in front of us. And of course, it's a completely different situation, because obviously that pond effectively will have no great crested newts in before you do anything.
That's right.
So they'll all be moved. So that takes it off the agenda, which is one thing. Councillor Brown asked you a question on when was the survey done of the newts? Was it done before the demolition or after the demolition of the Nissen huts? Because obviously you said you did no damage to the habitat and numbers of great crested newts. How can you be certain of that if the survey wasn't done before and after that situation?
So the survey was completed after the demolition. The reason for the demolition, which hasn't come out in the conversations today, and I feel I should explain it, is obviously the Nissen huts were part of the original scheme. They are asbestos by frame and construction. And what we found, we had so much antisocial behaviour on the site. We had fly tipping, we had vagrants that were living inside them. There were bonfires, we had police orders, we had fire engines. There was all manner of trouble. And as a landowner, we are responsible for health and safety on the site. So a decision was made to clear the site and make it safe. And obviously that was part of the demolishment. There was no underground excavations, so not to disturb any of the archaeology. It was all top surface that was removed, and the asbestos was removed from site. Having said that, the actual investigation with the newts, with the count, was taking place after the demolition. But obviously, from the point of the demolition was concerned, they didn't go anywhere near the pond. It was outside. The pond was separated from the demolition itself.
Yeah, could I just ask a question? How come I found asbestos on the site when I went there then? I found at least 3 pieces, and that was just without really looking.
Okay, so there was a lot of asbestos on the site.
Yep.
And as I said, we haven't concluded the demolition process because there's still areas under the ground. So we've actually started, again, preempting an outcome. We have actually engaged with 4 demolition contractors, and each of them are pricing the removal of any debris asbestos that's there. And also we'll do a full R&D survey before any work starts anyway. So that's
they're all under license to do that work.
I'm sorry?
They're all under license to do removal of asbestos.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's the cement-based product, which is non-notifiable, but nevertheless, it still needs to be done under a license.
Correct.
Councillor Brown?
Just one more question. When we're asking the questions, obviously the issue brought up of the new community hut or museum or whatever you want to call it. So presuming you go ahead and build that and you don't vary, which is a concern of the members, is that you come back and vary and say it's not viable, is looking at the layout, and if it is it's intended to be a community centre stroke museum, how in that existing layout that you're proposing are you going to take multiple visitors for parking? So you're like, so when you do sort of events, you go to the museum or the community centre or the village hall, it's not one or two who turn up, it's maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 people turn up. How are you going to accommodate people on that site? Because you must have thought about that, otherwise you won't be able to use it for the purposes of which it's stated in these documents.
So as Louise right mentioned, the Nissan Huts is part of the 106 agreement, but the interest of sort of being transparent. So ultimately the community centre which was shown on the outline planning consent, we checked the viability of that, given the fact that we'd have to pass on the responsibility to the local residents. And then also we then have to try and gather some support from the local councils, parish councils and the like to maintain it. The general feeling from that was that nobody wanted to take the responsibility for the maintenance of a new community centre. So when we met with the parish council, we lobbied the idea of it actually being, rather than just a community building, being an interpretation. So there were various different aspects on the site which draw reference to the history of the site, including the Nissan Huts to do with the hospital and also the RAF base as well. And so therefore the structure, whilst it still is yet to be determined, and we've also offered to go back to the parish council ward members to discuss this further until everyone is happy, the idea is that will be the location. We've also engaged with the local Polish community and the leader of the Polish, and it's their belief that actually the interest with regard to going to the site will be very moderate. Whilst there was interest in the site and its history, they were more interested in having a website recreated that marked the interest of the history of the site. We also spoke to the museum and the creator, and that same opinion was there as well, that they felt that there wasn't a draw to the site, and actually as long as we created the history and looked after it, and that was our guardianship. And that's what we do as a developer, and you're going to have to look at our other previous sites and know that's how we work.
Yeah, I don't think you've really answered my question. My question is about, that's great, the history and all that, we've debated all that, fine. My question is, if people come up to that interpretation centre and visit it, how are you accommodating the parking? How are you, so that it doesn't disturb the rest of the neighbours, so that the officers in this council then aren't going up there every 5 minutes dealing with antisocial behaviour and nuisance, etc., and the police aren't being dragged out. So where would people park? Because if you put something there, people will go to it. Depending, obviously, it's very different than what it's originally intended to be. So that's a little bit of news for us tonight. So that's understand it's not going to be a community centre, it's going to be a plaque or something like that.
No, it's not a plaque. Please don't think it's a plaque. It's a proper structure.
Well, it's a structure. We discussed one recently, excuse me, down at St Mary's. So, I think we do know what we're talking about. So just, sorry, let me speak. Sorry, let me speak for a second. So how are you going to accommodate the parking?
And so there is a Belmarth in that place. We had originally put 2 car parking spaces in there. We were told by Heritage that they didn't believe that was appropriate to put parking spaces there, and it should be more of a buffer area. So the car parking spaces were removed. This correlated with the fact that we'd taken advice from the Polish community, and also we spoke at the parish council where the members were there, and we also spoke to the museum, and they believed that there wouldn't be a huge amount of traffic onto the site. And apologies for interrupting.
Are there any more comments? And I would just like to say that Councillor Webster, myself, Andrew Cunningham, and the parish council, we were at that meeting when the Nissan Hut was discussed, and the parish council did state that they would not be able to afford to maintain it if a Nissan Hut was built. I know you're all sort of a little uptight about this application, but I'd please ask you not to be rude to people who are speaking. Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Harris? Councillor
You've answered one of the questions I was going to ask about why the decision was taken to demolish the Nissen huts. Is the building that you're going to put in place, is it going to be a sufficient accurately representation of the original one?
And that's why we wanted the consultation process with the people. We've actually shown it as a representation of the structure. What we don't want to do is this structure to become an antisocial behaviour location. We talked about it being the shape of a Nissan hut with the form of it, but then if you're not careful, you get the wrong type of interest in it. So again, we were looking at it perhaps as a way of interpretation, was a play equipment or some kind of sculpture that represented what was there previously, but somebody that people could interact with. That was our design thesis, but again, open to debate with necessary members.
So did you take sufficient drawings and accurate photographs to get the history there recorded before it was demolished?
We've got all the previous photographs of the site on record that were produced by the heritage people. And we've also got records that we can draw down off the archives anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Evans?
Okay, obviously I've got the section 106 in front of me, and it makes it very clear, well, makes it clear to me that existing Nissen hut should be used for a community centre. You seem to have agreed with the officer that's no longer necessary to comply with the section 106. How does that work? Because to me, it's in the section 106 that we have an existing refurbished Nissen hut. So surely we have to go back to square one if you're going to tear that up, and that contract is no longer viable.
I'm not suggesting that we tear the contract up, and the 106 still stands until such time that it is an application to change. If the feeling of the community and the feeling of the people is that the Nissan hut is still necessary, then we will install it in accordance with the 106. I'm just giving you the benefit of the design process that we've gone through and the consultation that we've had. So I'm happy to put it in if that's what's needed.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Harris? No, well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Harris. I'd now like to call Councillor Robert Child, who is the local ward councillor. I don't have to give you all the instructions, Councillor Child, because you know how it works. But you have 3 minutes. I'll remind you at 30 seconds.
Good evening, Chair and members. Before us is a reserved matters application, which is very different from the proposal that was given outline planning permission in 2016. In its present form, it is highly unlikely to have received planning permission as the location is unsustainable. The elements that swayed that committee, all of which have now disappeared from the proposal, included the heritage benefits, i.e. the interpretation centre and the history of World War I and II, including the Polish community, along with an innovative boiler located in the Nissen hut. Yet the Nissen huts have all been demolished into a pile of rubble with no enforcement action taken or planned. And a scheme for improvements to Sandy Lane has not been submitted to the council. Within this signed 106 agreement is the statement, this permission authorised only the development shown on the approved plans, without which it will be unauthorised and open to enforcement action to remedy the breach. Having spoken to a member of the legal profession, not associated with the Borough Council, independent one, I was told that the section 106 legally binds the land and the planning permission, and the only way to supersede these obligations is to put in a new application with a fresh 106 agreement. I note that the asbestos from the Nissen huts is still within the site, with no mention from the Environment Agency on the health risks, which begs the question,
should members have been tramping around over that site safely. Members of the public should have restricted access to this area. There are pieces of asbestos strewn across the site. With regard to ecology, there is a provision for a series of ponds and a wildlife area for the great crested newts. These great crested newts are present on the site and in and around the pond area. They are an endangered species protected by law with a fine or prison sentence as a deterrent. And yet I cannot find an updated response from the county ecologist. There is also concern with, I understand, no communication with the relevant landowners and no mention of the sewage foul water from the development. I haven't seen sufficient evidence to allay my fears with regard to the asbestos and great crested newts. And until more investigative work is carried out, feel that this application should be deferred with a need to take legal advice from a legal planning specialist on whether it ought to grant planning permission, particularly when elements of the Section 106 agreement and conditions have not been met. It can therefore be deferred or refused under policies EN2 and NPPF 174 to 188 of the local plan. Thank you very much.
Over to you, members. Any questions for Councillor Charles? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Child. We've clearly heard that there's no appetite in the community, and certainly these two our council, and the county council, to take on any significant community centre build. So how would you see that going ahead if we were to force that particular issue for the community? And I presume you've been part of the consultation around the changed site. So what we're hearing basically is that it's not really viable to do what was originally set out. Things have moved on to 2017, I think. We're now in 2022. So what is the view of you and the community on that one?
Well, the parish council are objecting on page 35. They are expecting the visitor and heritage centre to be built as per the 106 agreement. We did say that we couldn't provide any funds or service that centre, but it is important that that interpretation centre is built as well. It was in the front of the Melton Times, probably today. It was certainly on the Melton Times website, but a replication of that interpretation centre.
Any other questions for Councillor Charles? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I know we've spoke a lot about the Nissen hut and the asbestos. Was it not preferable for the hut, because of the presence of asbestos, was it not preferable for the hut to be demolished because of that? Or what would you and your residents have preferred, liked with that? Sorry, does that make any sense?
Well, no, probably not. But as far as we were concerned, we weren't aware that the demolition was taking place. We did know about the antisocial behaviour and the problems with drug abuse, but we weren't. We didn't know the site has just been dismissed into a load of rubble.
Okay, because from what I can gather, obviously it would have been better in an ideal world to have kept the hut as it was, but because of that presence of asbestos and those safety aspects, although there were foolish people taking drugs which are bad for your health anyway, that kind of safety aspect that had to have been done. So I'm just
it's in the agreement 106 agreement. It says that they to restore the Nissen hut. You can't restore anything that's just in a pile of rubble.
I get that. I really do. But I think the lesser of two evils may have happened here.
Councillor Wood.
If we were to force the developer to create a museum, and the parish council can't or won't afford to pay for the upkeep of it, and the district council can't, who pays?
Well, that then falls the developer's problem. Is it signed up in the 106 agreement to provide an interpretation centre with the biomass boiler, and funds are tight, so it falls within the permission that's been granted.
Members, it might be useful if I just read out what the wording of the Section 106 agreement is. So the Nissen Hut Interpretation Centre scheme, which has to be submitted prior to the commencement of development. That means the scheme outlining the restoration and future use and maintenance of the Nissen Hut Interpretation Centre to be submitted by the owner to the Borough Council in accordance with clause 3.3 of the agreement. So it's for the developer to put that forward when they put forward that scheme, and that includes the future maintenance.
Probably what I say, you know, the parish council can't take it on.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, councillor. Presentation. Section 106 is meant to cover things that are required to make a proposal acceptable in planning terms. Yet there are occasions where there are some things that are not strictly in that get into Section 106 agreements. Is this one of them? I mean, was this how did this, do you know how this came about? You know, it seems a bit strange to have 30 houses, but the only reason you can have them is because there's a Nissen with some history in it.
No, this was a settlement for Polish people displaced by the Second World War, formerly occupied to house the RAF officers, based on Great Dolby Airfield, with a metal perimeter fence with barbed wire on the top to prevent intruders. And the RAF officers were based on the airfield during the war. And later, these Nissen huts were used to house the Polish people after fleeing the Nazi occupation of their country. And that was disbanded in 1964. The Polish people were extremely hard-working people who settled in parts of Melton, and many of them were employed by local firms. But this has a history to the RAF, the Great Dolby Airfield, and the Polish people from the World War. So it's not just made up of a pie in the sky shot. That's the reason.
Any other questions for Councillor Childs? Thank you very much, Councillor Childs. We're now over to Louise, if there's anything else you want to add. No, thank you very much. We're now open for debate then. So if who would like to start the debate? So we're not having a debate then. Councillor.
Could I mean, obviously, I can only speak on myself. When it comes to the Great Kirsten Newts, we've gone from what's in the papers here to something which is completely different, which we were looking at mitigation measures, assuming that the Great Kirsten Newts was staying there. They're now moving, and that's completely different. There's nothing in here about the archaeological survey. There is, you know, we've heard from the ward member about, and the officer has told us the maintenance is not, Tom has just told us it's not our problem, it's the developer's problem, that they've got to put forward a plan for this community centre and its maintenance. To be honest, Chair, everything's changed from this paper I've got in front of me. And that's the concern I've got. for this committee to be actually coherent, its response to this is difficult, being everything's changed from this paper. And I'm sorry, Solicitor, it has significantly changed. I knew about this district scheme, but I think a lot of other people in this committee won't understand
Just
how
stop
it
you
works.
there. Louise wishes to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. Take on board the points that you're making. I think the agent was very detailed in his response to members, including some of the works that has been going on in the background as part of their submission for the discharge of conditions. Those matters are secured by condition for the outline, so such as the archaeological work that's taking place, the background work in terms of the ecological license, etc. Those are all matters that are separate to the reserve matters application this evening. So if we can just take you back to the initial presentation, which was the appearance, landscaping, scale and layout of the site. And those are the matters that members need to consider this evening, just to take you back to the matters which are for consideration.
Obviously, the size of the Nissan hut, if it becomes like the existing, if it goes back to being the existing Nissan hut refurbished, the scale between what we've got in front of us layout wise is about 10% of what a Nissan hut refurbished would have looked like. To me, that means this committee are looking at a layout that could significantly change if we impose the correct section 106, which is to replace the Nissan hut with a similar size scaled building. And that's where I'm struggling, because the one that there's put beside it before us here with the layout scheme is not the one that, from what I've heard, was agreed or could be agreed with the parish and ward member.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, just to be clear about the Nissan hut scheme, it's the section 106 that requires the full submission of those details, including its size, its appearance. The purpose of the application and its involvement in today's application is purely where it sits within the site in terms of layout of the site. There is no details of the Nissan huts that is being determined tonight.
Sorry, Chair, but if it's 10 times the size of what it is, then how are we going to get 30 dwellings in?
Yep, so that would be the only point. If the space is clearly not big enough, that is something that you could consider. But in terms of the actual scheme of the Nissan huts, that's not been put forward.
Councillor Brown.
Okay, I'm just going to bring a bit of reality to what I've heard here, because I think we can say now that you ain't going to get an Nissan hut from what this gentleman's been saying to the size of what the community thought they were getting back in 2017. So I think the one thing I would say to the officers is we just need to be a little bit more clear in the future and be clear on the reports, etc., because the interpretation coming through is that they're going to get something that's the size of one of these huts, and it's coming across to me now that that isn't reality. If we agree the layout tonight, that's not going to be possible, because the way where the road's going up into it, etc. So that's my first comment on it. So I think we just, whatever we do tonight, we have to accept that that's what's done. To me, it would be much better if you brought the whole thing together and agreed it as one application. And I think there needs to be some learning from both any applicant and any department on that there. The appearance of the houses and stuff, I do tend to agree with Councillor Chandler, but I bet you there's probably not a lot. That's subjective view on that. I am correct in that the fact that newts are going to be taken off site now. So we've debated that, and we debated that in London, when actually we could have not wasted all our time on all of that. Basically, so that's not an issue. If they're going to be taken off site and protected, that's not an issue to no longer. Now there'll be people who are more learned than what I am around ecology who might be able to come in and say whether that's a good or a bad thing. The other thing as well is when we get with Councillor Pritchard's thing, whether we like it or not, putting the houses in, you're not, I'm coming from a farmer background, you're not going to be able to have badgers and newts incorporated into a development either as well. I'm dealing with a badger issue in some property that have in elsewhere in the country, and you just can't, there's certain things that you have to do there, etc. And the scale of it, well, it is what it is, and it's coming forward on this. And to me, is what we have to consider is that, are we going to accept what's been put in front of us and condition things correctly? And some of these conditions will need people a little bit more robust than what I will be around the ecology and the environmental impacts. Or do you defer it and ask for it to come back in? And it's weighing up what those two things at the moment. To me, there's no reason, I don't see any legal reason how you could refuse it. But I'm going to listen to debate and toy with those two things around. Do we go with this with key hard conditions, or do we defer it? And what do we defer? What would you be deferring it on? And that would be around the ecology. But if the ecology had been moved off site, I can't see the benefit of that at this moment in time. But I'm just going to leave it to everybody else to come in, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Smith.
So I have concerns about the ecology as well. I'm really like sort of 33% on all three decisions at the minute. I'm also a little bit kind of troubled about the housing mix right now. Is there a proven local need for 24 plus bedroom houses and no 2-bedroom houses? Especially in like such an unsustainable area with the limited road width and everything. Like, I'm finding that a bit troublesome right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wood.
Sorry, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think as with a lot of developments, it's not perfect. And I think if I had any issue, it would probably mostly be around the housing mix. I think in terms of things like landscaping, etc., just listening to the amount of consultation that's gone on and the degree to which the developer has actually worked with a whole host of different agencies, including Natural England, which has been done to try and ensure that the ecological position is as positive and as sustainable as can possibly be the case. I don't personally, I don't think we can criticize that. I think there seems to be a lot of consultation and a lot of listening to many local groups and national agencies to try and do best by the site. So I must admit, generally speaking, I'm really quite positive, other than perhaps the housing mix.
Councillor Pritchett.
I got a great deal of comfort from listening to the agent speaking. I think if there is an issue, it's in the quality, the content of the report that we've had. And I take your point that you've made about what we're here to decide tonight, Louise, but we were and have been right to question the relationship between ecology and mitigation and the design. And I think that we've had an incomplete report on that, and I'm very grateful for what the agents given me a great deal of comfort on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dan. Any other comments from anybody? Now,
can I propose deferral based on policy C2? Would that for the
I don't know.
housing mix?
I will just consult.
I meant EN2. Yeah, that is exactly what I ordered.
So EN2, on what basis?
I am talking about housing mix here, aren't I?
No, that would be C2.
Oh,
So
sorry. I did mean C2
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, C2, because I'm just, we've got our sort of optimum housing mix here, and it's kind of been completely disregarded. And I just want a bit more dialogue on that. I want it to come back sort of more inclusive to what our residents can and are able to and are willing to want. Does that make sense? So I just want a bit more consultation with perhaps the ward members, residents, see what is actually needed in that area and come back with something that's not 30 houses with goodness knows how many people living there.
Hand over to Louise to comment.
Yes, thank you. Of course, you can defer if that is your wish. If I could just take members to paragraphs 4.25 through to 4.29 of the report. At that point, we do admit that it's not in line with an optimum mix. And when we say optimum mix, we mean for the borough, not just for the independent sites. I think you're quite right in your comments here. The nature of the site itself is quite different. Its location is remote and one that in different circumstances now, you know, maybe a different scenario altogether. But the certain constraints of the site, along with the provision of bungalows, we have acknowledged that it's not of an optimum mix for the borough. But as officers, we felt that there was specific circumstances that made the mix acceptable. But of course, if that's not your opinion, you are within your right to defer.
Am I okay to come back? I completely understand that. I think sort of looking at the bigger picture, I know that the agent has spoke about passing places and things like that, but we're talking about an awful lot of people and an awful lot of cars. And I'm not entirely sure that I am comfortable with that response. The width of the road as well, and sort of the propensity for emergency services and that kind of thing. I would feel a lot more comfortable if we could have the applicant go away and take another look and see if they can figure anything else out with the housing mix, because at the minute I'm just not comfortable with it.
Okay. Were you proposing that, Councillor Smith, or have you just put it on the table for people to think about while some more questions are asked?
I don't mind leaving it on the table, but if I could come back and then propose
Okay,
it again once that's done.
Thank you. There is a contribution here to off-site affordable houses in the section 106 agreement, and I too take Councillor Smith's point. I've been thinking about this one. But given the location, I mean, I will end up by asking if there's been a design meeting with the parish council on this. To create an open area and to balance the design versus the planting and space for badgers and whatever nukes remain, you know, the only alternative would be to have for the developer to try and apply for higher numbers. So whilst I see both sides to this, but the question is, did you have a design meeting with the parish council?
Yeah, so discussions were held with officers, the agent, parish council and ward member. Of the issues that came out of those discussions, again, revisions were made, amendments were made. It's the housing mix, like I say, it's not considered to be an optimum mix for the borough, but it wasn't raised as one of the concerns as part of those workshops that were undertaken. I think there is, again, a consideration here with regards to the specific nature of the site, the location of the site, and Councillor Pritchett is quite right in his comments that to change, to make their house sizes smaller, viability may kick in, and there may then be a need to have more houses on the site. The outline was for 30 dwellings, so that would change the kind of the planning discussions altogether, because it then the reserve matters wouldn't fit in accordance with the outline. So there are other things to consider in line with the housing mix. Does that help at all?
Councillor Brown, I'm sorry, Councillor Chandler.
Going back to what I said about 3/4 of an hour ago, 4.41 says it introduced a development of more urban feel than previously existed. Well, I think that is very clear. And it also, on 4.25, we talk about 8 4-bed units and 12 5-bed units, which is 66% of the development. I think that is too high. I expect they've got I know they've got a lot of expense. We've heard that already tonight of what this, the ecology is costing them. But 5-bedroom houses aren't selling currently. And, you know, well, I'm only speaking from my own ward. They're not selling. I think it's 12 is far too many out of 30. I think it's too many. And I do think we need to look at sites. It's unsustainable. It's in the middle of open countryside, and we don't want urban dwellings. They've got to be a little bit reflective on where they are. We've got a scheduled ancient monument. Surely we don't want garish modern houses adjacent to that. That's my comment. I mean, whether we can come to a conclusion tonight or whether it wants deferring for further discussion on this, I leave that in your hands, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Brown.
Just a question for Louise, really. It was mentioned that you recognise it was not an optimum mix of various houses. Is this an assessment made now or 5 years ago when the outline plan? Because the needs will have changed over the last 5 years.
Yes, certainly. So an indication was made through the outline of a mix, but now obviously we're in accordance with NPPF, neighbourhood plan, local plan, so which is why we say it's not an optimum mix. We do acknowledge that, but we do look at the context of what is being offered here in terms of bungalows, the additional landscaping and some of the other benefits of the site. So it's not just the siloed in terms of the housing mix, it's the overall benefits or consideration of the site.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, looking at, I think Councillor Smith's got a valid point on the housing mix, actually. Yeah, when you look at it, and then I look at the need within the borough, and we look at the fact that we're bringing 5% affordables in the town. Can I just check with Louise what percentage affordables we would have applied to this site? Would it be what the parish are putting, or would it have been what we're putting in the town? That's the first question I have for you. The second thing is 880,000 of commuted sums will get us about 4 or 5 council houses if we're lucky. That's the other point in that, just to be, and for those who are listening, that's the field I work in, so I do know about these things, and also the design as well. But if you're going to get, for the housing mix here, you're going to look at high-end people with lots of disposable income to come in and buy it. This is not going to be a site for people who are on low incomes, etc., which is a little bit contradictory to our economy, because our economy is a low wage economy in Melton. So I think probably if members are minded and not, they'll probably support a deferral to sort out the housing mix on it. But I think that's probably one of the main sticking points. But Louise, could you just tell us how we've calculated the 180,000 and how that's come about, please?
So the 106 was agreed at the outline stage, and that was the sum that formed part of the section 106.
Could I ask, you mentioned consultation with the council, was that the previous ward councillor or the current ward councillor?
So we've had design meetings with the parish council and the current ward member.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Obviously, we've moved on from ecology because of new information. We're now moving on to the housing mix. Councillor Brown has implied that there's enough funds for 4 affordables. Can I ask Louise? Five affordables. Can I ask Louise how many should be under the local plan guidance? How many there should be on this site?
Sorry, just to interrupt. Members need to be cautious not to get too caught up on this. The affordable housing secured at the outline stage, and it can't then be changed after.
Absolutely clear. I'm relating the conversation to the mix and around the pressure on the needs of this type of housing within the borough, which is for smaller houses, as we know within our local plan and the Great Dalby neighbourhood plan. So that's just me clarifying. I'm not trying to tie the thing in, Tom. I'm trying to just bring a bit of your totality to the conversation. Yeah.
Can I just clarify your question then, Councillor Evans, as to
What I'm looking at obviously here is we have a local plan, and as you know, Tom, which says how many should be in each development. And I just want for clarification to see the difference between what is being offered, which was, I know, established 4 years ago, and what we should have on this site if it's correct balance of housing. That's all I'm asking. And obviously, I'd just like to point out to members, we also have a big problem in that obviously the bigger the size of the houses, the more car parking spaces and cars will have to be catered for. So having all this number of 5-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses will mean lots more car parking space, which will make it a much more cramped site.
Councillor Holmes.
Madam Chairman, are we not supposed to be green? I've been sitting here thinking about this. Yeah, Mr. Greenman, yeah. And we're putting this where, well, we've passed it, so it's going to be, you know, this is what we've got. And then I noted that someone said, I'm sure who it was, probably it was the ward councillor, said that the Badger set was flooded. So then also the ward councillor mentioned sewage. Now I know I'm always going on about sewage, but where can we, I must have missed
Mr.
it.
Holmes, I'm sorry, but we're not debating sewage tonight.
Well,
Or flooding. You know what it is we're debating. Those issues will come up, they will be discussed and they'll be fully looked at, but we're not looking at it tonight. I'm sorry.
Well, can we then, would it not be a good idea then to defer this so that we can make sure that everything is done in probably a lot better way? And I'm saying, and whether you like it or not, I'm very concerned about the entrance and exit, and I think I can quite understand Councillor Smith with a small child, and there will be people walking down that road and getting down that road with small children. They're not all going to be people who are going to be in cars.
Is there a question?
Yes, and
Councillor Holmes?
it is a concern. It is a concern to me. So probably it would be a good idea to defer it because this is totally different application really to the one in 2017, wasn't it, or 16? I've got it down. It's 2016.
Thank you for your contribution. I've got
Thank
three
you.
other councillors wishing to speak. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, from a Green perspective, I actually take Councillor Pritchard's view, having listened to him. I think if I've got the argument right, is actually that if the housing mix were to include 2 bedrooms and more 3 bedrooms, actually you may end up with more built mass on the site. So actually it's less green because actually you haven't got as many open spaces. However, I do wonder whether or not there would, without a large change in footprint, whether or not there would be any opportunity to perhaps change, even if just a small amount, the mix, particularly between 5 and 4 bed, perhaps a couple of extra 3 bed, so that actually there's a more even distribution across the size of the units that are being proposed at the moment. For 12 5 beds to be there, it does seem as if there is a large number of houses that may have less of a market and be available to fewer local people. So I just wonder whether or not, you know, if you had sort of 6, 8 5 bed and had a trickle down into 4s and 3s, so that actually the overall footprint wasn't changed very much, so the site was still really as ecologically sound as we can get it.
Councillor Brown.
I'm I think the only way to sort this out around this housing mix is defer this and get it back as quickly as possible. So I'm going to propose a deferral basically based on C2. And possibly I'd like to look at the design as well around D1 as well, just to make sure you get that right, taken into account Councillor Chandler's comments. And if that comes back, absolutely fine. I think, you know, we've bottomed out the ecology stuff, etc. Let's get this sorted out. If the applicant can get this turned around pretty quickly, I'm sure we can get something sorted out. So I'm proposing the deferral on those 2 points. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Just a couple of points there. So it's the usual warning about potential non-determined.
That's okay.
I've got to give you the advice.
Yep.
So potential non-determination. So
Yep.
the 2 points that you've given, C2 on the housing mix and D2 on the design.
Yeah.
Are you able to give us any more sort of explanation on those reasons, just so that we can record the reason for deferral?
Absolutely. On the housing mix, listen to the debate around that, around the amount of 5 beds, whether we can reduce that down to sort of for the affordability, and looking at the cost of living crisis, linking into the local plan, the neighbourhood plan around smaller houses. I accept the viability will, 1 and 2 beds is not going to be acceptable, but they could come up with some lower cost 3 beds, 4 beds, etc. around that. Around the design, if we just make it a little bit more in keeping with the rural look, which you can do nowadays at not great cost, but mainly it's around the housing mix. And I think if people can go away, have a discussion, we can get this back quite quickly and get it sorted out. Yeah.
So just 1 point, if I may. So you mentioned more in keeping with rural design. Is there something in particular that you have in mind design-wise that you think would be appropriate? Just so I can tease out a little bit more of the detail.
Probably a little bit more around the detail of the bricks, the layout, the slate, etc. And the look of the frontage of the properties and the character of the properties.
Okay, so the materials are secured by outline, so it's the look and the character.
Look and the character, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Councillor Brown's proposed deferral. Councillor Smith, being as you first mentioned it, do I take it that you're seconding it?
Yes, happily. For all the same reasons. I'd also like to plant a little bit of a potential earworm in the applicant's mind. From what I can gather from the floor plans, there doesn't really seem to be much of a master bedroom in any of the houses. So perhaps the houses could all be kept the same size, but have a master bedroom rather than the extra one. Just, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm sure the agents listened to that. Right, it's been proposed, been seconded for deferral. Can I show of hands, everybody who is in agreement with that? 1, 2, 3, 8. Thank you very much. So that proposal is carried. Thank you. Now have 5 minutes break. I know Councillor Brown won't be at the next application because he's declared an interest. So if we can just have a 5-minute comfort break and then get back to the meeting. Thank you. Can you take your seats again, please? That's it. Right. Everybody's back. Councillor Brown is not taking part in this application because he's got an interest. So this is planning application 15/00017/ and it's land west of Marquis Road and north of Station Road, Old Dalby. And it's a variation of a planning obligation within the section 106 agreement. So I will now hand over to Louise.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is one of those matters that comes to you now and again, members. So it's a bit different to a planning application. I hope the report has been set out clearly in the sense that it's a deed of variation for the section 106. The section 106 was in relation to residential development of 39 dwellings. The section 106 took the form of a unilateral undertaking, which was imposed by the inspector at the Peel. So the undertaking included provision of affordable housing units as 40% of the total units, which equates to 16 dwellings. Affordable houses are specified to be social rented units, new build home buy, and intermediate affordable housing units. So the agent has submitted a series of documentation to the local planning authority. In support of the request, the developer has advised that approaches have been made to a number of registered providers, housing associations, with a view to entering into legal arrangements to sell the on-site affordable provision. So these have been unsuccessful, and the applicant has demonstrated that it is unable to secure a registered provider for the 16 affordable units required on the site with the tenure as currently set out in the section 106 agreement. The issue with the current section 106 agreement, it doesn't allow an alternative tenure to be submitted. So the deed of variation here, it sets out an application to modify the section 106 undertaking, and a series of amendments to the existing 106 are proposed to facilitate this revised approach. An alternative scheme that the owner will provide 50% of the affordable housing units, i.e. 8 units, as discounted market dwellings, and 50%, i.e. 8 units, as affordable housing for rent, with the affordable housing for rent being transferred to the council at an agreed price. So the proposed tenure mix would result in delivery of affordable housing of a type for which there is a local need, and it has been adequately demonstrated that the configuration in the original section 106 has not been of interest to providers. And for that reason, we are recommending that the deed of variation is agreed.
Thank you. Any questions for Louise? Explanations? Councillor Wood.
I suppose the simple question is, has it been ascertained that the council has the funds to buy 8 houses if that is the way that we move forward?
Sorry. I don't think that bit would be relevant to this because that's not a planning consideration. It's merely just to change the tenure mix, and it just happens that the council wants to buy those, but that isn't a relevant planning consideration. It won't make any difference to the by the 8. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions, Louise? Well, we're debating now if there's no more questions. So, Councillor.
I think this is a long time been coming, not just at Old Dalby, but as you know, I've repeatedly said I've been around all the garage sites and all the different backyards of existing NBC properties, and we've never come up with anything. I think we've built 7, have we? Something like that. But it's very minimal. And I welcome this. And I mean, there is a need there. There are jobs at Old Dalby. It's at the right end of the thing. The only thing I'm concerned about, it's a long way from the school. You know, the children have got a long way to walk to the school. But no, I mean, I'm all for this, and I'm quite happy to propose it.
Right, thank you, councillor Chandler. I'll come back to you about that because councillor Illingworth's got his hand up.
Thank you. Yes, I think it ends up being a win-win, doesn't it? The required number get built and we increase our housing stock at a stroke. So I'm quite happy to second it, if need be. Yeah.
Back to councillor Chandler. Councillor Chandler, where you proposing it? Microphone. So councillor Chandler has proposed the application. Councillor Illingworth has seconded it. Can I have a show of hands? All in favour? That's 9. So all in favour, unanimous, carried. Thank you. That is the end of the planning meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Could members just stay behind for 1 minute because Louise has got something for some of the members, I believe.